Hello, everybody. Beautiful people on this beautiful day. I hope you're feeling as great as we are. If not, stick around because we have a great talk with the wonderful Carrie today. We are super excited to have you here at the ZenGen Collective. Here again with, of course, our wonderful people. We got Mama Z right here. We have Heidi. We have David. And, of course, the mighty Carrie. And I'm really excited to introduce her. So for those of you who don't know, Carrie has quite a thick resume. I almost don't even know where to begin. She's been all around the world, lived in Italy. She's lived in Panama, New York, and all kinds of wonderful places. She's done microbiology for NASA. She's an English teacher. She taught at the American School in Florence. She teaches Zentangle art, which I've had a wonderful opportunity to take a lesson from her, and it was super fantastic. And there's so much I want to talk to her about. But today I really want to get into sovereignty, what that even means, why it's important, and how we inculcate that in our lives. So without further ado, I would love to hand the mic to Carrie. Is there anything I missed that I should tell people about? Oh, wait, one more thing. A lot of you may know her from all of her light work she's done with the Loved One Society. So shout out to her and her people there who are doing what they can to carry the torch forward into this new age. So thank you so much for that. Carrie, if you wouldn't mind maybe giving yourself a little more of an introduction, and then we can dive right into our subject of sovereignty, what that is, why it's important, and how we use that in our lives. So please.
All right. Okay. Well, you've got most of it. I've owned some businesses. I'm a retired massage therapist, as well as all those other things. That happens when you've lived a long time. You get to do a lot of stuff. So the other thing, though, that's meaningful is I have been trained as a transformational seminar leader. So that's in my background for decades, really. And the most important thing, I think, in my background is that I've been studying human growth and development potential, communication, relationships for decades. And that all fits in with everything we're doing now in terms of bringing this planet and all of her beautiful beings into the golden age. So sovereignty, the actual topic of sovereignty came to my awareness maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But I realize in retrospect, looking back over my life, it's always been there in lessons that I've learned and mistakes that I've made. Recently, it's become a passion, because what I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years is that when I'm in my sovereignty, it's really easy for me to offer that to others. And when we're dancing in sovereignty with each other, whether it's communicating or living from sovereignty, or now doing our service from sovereignty, conflict just basically falls away because there's no match for it energetically. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. The way to start thinking about it is to look at different types of relationships, because sovereignty is a relationship issue. Whether it's parental, teacher-student, lovers, siblings, it really doesn't matter, because anytime we're relating with another, we have an opportunity to relate in a wide variety of ways. So the first one, which most of us are familiar with, is codependency. I'm going to do a couple of definitions just to get us on the same page. So a codependent relationship is one where one person needs the other and the other needs to be needed. And as you heard in that, there's a lot of need there. So when need is running the show between two people, the need is what's in control, not the two beings relating with each other. So that is the hardest relationship in which to exercise or experience sovereignty with each other, because there is none. It's all about the need. Typically, one person gives up all of their sovereignty to satisfy the person that they're getting their needs met by. The one who's satisfying the needs is often kind of running the show of the other one, they're not thinking about sovereignty in the sense that we're going to define it. They are getting their way, but there's some pieces missing in terms of real sovereignty in that kind of relationship.
Mhm.
Independent relationships where two people are strongly independent can offer each one a sense of sovereignty, but there's not a lot of connection and cooperation and love in that because everybody's doing their own thing and they're really not thinking about the sovereignty of the other. And then the third form of relating is interdependency or interdependent beings. And they have the best chance of being in a sovereign relationship with each other if they're really paying attention to the other. And in an interdependent relationship, you know, I know what my needs are and I see what your needs are, and I'm as caring of your needs being met as I am of my own. And that's the kind of relationship that we're heading toward more and more, where sovereignty really plays a pivotal role in how they relate with each other. Not only how they relate with each other, but how they feel about each other long term. That's the basis upon which a long-term relationship can occur.
Mhm.
So those three kinds of relationships are really good to keep in mind and to look at. Okay, where am I? What kind of relationship do I have with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends, with my kids, etc., with my housemate, whatever it is? You know, which one of those three is really predominant? So that's kind of the baseline for it.
Well, thanks for starting with that. You kind of stole one of the questions right out of my mouth. I was
Okay.
hoping to just thank you. I was actually hoping to ask about that specifically and how that relates to relationships of all kinds. So it's a great place to jump off. And also too, as you mentioned, like defining it, how would you put it in a nutshell for folks who don't kind of already know what we're speaking of?
Okay, I was going to go there next. So good. Most of us have heard the word sovereignty in terms of national sovereignty, the sovereignty of God, or just sovereignty all by itself. So national sovereignty is obviously France can't tell Italy what to do. Okay, each country is sovereign and gets to choose how they rule themselves, etc. The sovereignty of God, for those people who hold that as a tenet, means that God is the authority over that person, over everything. What I'm talking about is divine personal sovereignty, and those first two words are really meaningful. The divine part of it comes from the fact that it's our birthright to be sovereign personally. So no matter what's going on nationally in the United States or wherever you may be, it doesn't impact your personal sovereignty. And here's, I'm going to give you my working definition. And with this, invite everybody to spend some time and come up with what's your working definition, because the essence of sovereignty is you get to choose whatever is best for you. So here's my working definition. This evolved over a long period of time. It has three parts.
Mm-hmm.
They all fit together, and for me, I need all of them. So divine personal sovereignty for me is that every living soul has the birthright to be, do, have, believe, and choose whatever's best for them. That's part one. Part two is they get to have all of that without any outside criticism, judgment, manipulation, coercion, etc. Nobody has the right to impose upon that being any of those negative energetics because somebody chooses to do something that they don't like. And then the third part of it is that being who has that birthright also has the responsibility for what their choices are. So when I talk about this, the first question I usually get is, well, you need to add something in there. You need to add in, you can't harm another. Everybody thinks that at the beginning, who's not really already aware of all of this. The problem with that is that if you impose a dictate on someone, you can't hurt anybody else, you automatically violate their sovereignty. So it's a catch-22. It's a between a rock and a hard place kind of thing. So you can't tell somebody that they can't hurt another based on divine personal sovereignty. But if someone does hurt another, there will be consequences. That is the third part of the working definition. You need to be willing to be responsible for whatever you be, do, choose, have, believe, and how it impacts the world. You can still do it, but you're going to have consequences.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I love the three-parter on that. A couple of things that occur to me with what you just said is, first of all, in terms of harming another, well, obviously that kind of you're violating someone else's sovereignty if you just go around hurting people. I mean, that kind of folds in.
Exactly.
And I just really, I like how you, I really like how you spoke about the words you use, the divine personal sovereignty, right? And how that is our birthright.
Yeah.
I think that so many folks, and I'm sure you've seen this in your time and work, they struggle with that. They're so busy in codependent relationships, or they're so independent that there's kind of, even if it conceptually makes sense that we're all, in charge of us, that there's some blocks that happen pretty typically there. What would you say are some of the things that stand in people's way psychologically right out of the gates?
Well, right out of the gate, yeah, right out of the gate, most people don't even know that they have personal sovereignty from the get-go. Most people, because we come out of the womb and we're instantly programmed, we're instantly indoctrinated. We're told you should. I don't use the word should in my vocabulary because it is inherently a judgment. It is inherently a direction for another. You shouldn't do that. You should do this. So it goes back to, as I say, birth, where we are put into a variety of different systems, whether it's our parents, our older siblings, once we get to school, churches, family, friends. I mean, the list goes on, aunts, uncles, grandparents, they all have ideas about how things should be. And it's not that they're bad and wrong for having those ideas. They've been indoctrinated just the way the baby is about to be indoctrinated. So it's this perpetual indoctrination and programming of how we are supposed to be that eliminates the possibility for most people to even think about themselves from a sovereign place. So that's number one, and that is what we need to change. It is changing. More and more children, the children that are coming onto the planet now are coming on with a far greater awareness and level of consciousness every generation. They're coming on as teachers, they're coming on as healers, and they intuitively have a sense that something's wrong if they're being corralled, controlled, manipulated. I had my personal experience, I had a very controlling dad who was also had a substance problem. So I was never raised, well, I was raised to be independent in certain areas of my life if they didn't impact my father in a negative way.
Right.
And most of us have had that too, where, there are some gray areas where you get to push the envelope a little bit. But we really need to start with children, and it's easy. You can do it with a child probably as young as a year or 2 years old if you give them choices. And it can be simply, would you like broccoli or green beans? It's still something that the parent has a health awareness of. It's not candy or broccoli, but the child starts getting a sense that they have a little bit of control in their life.
I love that. I also thank you so much. This is so wonderful to hear. I love the words you're using for this and getting should out of your vocabulary. I mean, how many habits do we have where we're doing that? I also, one of the blocks that I think a lot of people have with the sovereignty is that now it's their responsibility. That's the other side of the edge of the sword, is that I think a lot of people are comfortable with someone else making all the decisions for them. And so when you say, hey, I'm sovereign, I'm free, okay, then now that means you got to handle it yourself. It's like now you have to take that responsibility upon you. So even though sovereignty there's a freedom in it. I know for me, I feel incredibly free in my sovereignty, but I also know that comes with work, with effort, with labor, that I'm no longer leaving that to others to handle for me, whether it's my opinions, right? Whether it's taking out the trash or whatever it is. It's like I have to own my space in it and not just say, I'm free, get out of my way. I have a duty, so to speak.
Right.
What do you feel about that?
Yeah. Accountability is very important. And if you're not taking responsibility, you're playing victim. The whole victim responsible duality is very, very interesting. People who play victim do it because there's a payoff. The issue is, will I be happier taking responsibility, ultimate responsibility, in the end, than the payoff makes me for playing victim? So that's a huge piece, because victim mentality is rampant on this planet.
Agreed.
So part of making the shift to living by and communicating by and doing our work and service from sovereignty is letting go of the victim role in everything, completely. And I'll tell you just a quick little story. One of the trainers that I was working with told us he had 3 teenage children, a girl and 2 boys. And one day the girl brought a glass of milk into the living room and set it on the coffee table. And shortly after that, her 2 brothers came crashing through the living room, crashed into her, threw the glass on the carpet. And Brian, the trainer, said, "So who's responsible?" And of course, you could say the girl, because she put the milk in the living room in the first place where it probably didn't belong. Or you could say the boys because they were rowdy. Or you could say all 3 kids. But Brian said, none of that. I'm ultimately responsible. I chose to have them. That is taking responsibility. So that's an extreme, and obviously was used as an example. But at the same time, it has really impacted me, because now I look for, where am I ultimately responsible? Personally, I let somebody bully me out a lot of money. I could be really pissed at that person, excuse my language. But I let myself be bullied. So when we get the idea that we and are willing to embrace it, that we are actually ultimately responsible for everything that we experience, good, bad, indifferent, it makes it a lot easier then to recognize our sovereignty. They go hand in hand.
That's wonderful. I like that kind of like that top down view, that 40,000-foot view on it, right? And like, where's my place in that? That's wonderful. I those stories always work for me too. Sometimes those are what really stick in my head, and the extremes really work well for me too. I want to make sure I'm not ignoring any questions or input by Mama Z, Heidi, or David here. Did you guys want to jump in here before we go forward? Do you have any questions there? David, what do you got, my brother?
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, I can see for myself how just living in this world and being programmed over time has like removed that type of responsibility that you're talking about. And in my current work, as I remove the programming, for instance, the belief system that the police are going to save me, or that some organization is responsible for what happened to me. A lot of those things, they're falling away, and it's allowing me to really take that high position in my responsibility. Like you say, I have children, and like I have a grandson coming. So, whose responsibility is this grandson of mine? Is it my son's and his wife, or where is my responsibility? Because I decided to have my son. So, I have to assess that and discern that. And I also, as a father, have to watch the way that I act with my son as he goes through the process of having a child, and can't be over fathering or giving a lot of advice, unsolicited advice, So I really appreciate the way that you're breaking things down. It's really helpful to me, and I'm sure to all of our viewers. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And you've brought up a really important point. Unsolicited advice is a sovereignty killer. And it is, again, rampant because we see something and we automatically go, oh, what would no, don't do it that way. Do it this way. Or if you do it that way, you're going to get in trouble. So part of that, and this is a higher spiritual perspective, when we attempt to stop someone or manipulate someone or move somebody in a different direction, because we have no idea what their life plan is, I call it their blueprint, their soul blueprint, we have no idea. We hardly have our own soul blueprint ideas. So it's very difficult to suss out what is going on for another. So they might be about to have an accident and we push them out of the way, being the good Samaritan or the loving person that we are, but it might have been that very accident that was the thing that saved them on a soul level in this lifetime. So asking questions and asking permission is so valuable and important. So David, in terms of you and your son and now your grandson, before the baby's even born, it could be valuable. Notice how I say that. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm making a suggestion. You can take it or leave it. There's no energy behind what I'm not saying you should talk to your, I'm not doing that. I'm saying you could sit down and actually have a conversation with your son and say, I really want to honor your sovereignty with your child. Can we come up with something that will work for you? When I see something I'd like to share with you, how would you like me to do that? And automatically you create a ground of being between the two of you, where rather than him feeling imposed upon by something you might say to him, he will much more likely welcome your input. And in the moment, if you see something happening with your grandson, I mean, this is a long-term project you've got here, many, many years coming. If you see something going on with your grandson that you feel your son should handle differently, you could say, would you be willing to hear a different perspective? So you offer an invitation, you ask questions. Those things honor the sovereignty of another. Telling someone what to do, using directing words, assuming we know better than the other for them, are all violations of sovereignty.
You're still pinning on something that I find so important. Thank you for diving this direction, guys. Thank you, Carrie. Thanks for the question, David. The idea that communication skills are a huge part of what we're talking about. And we're pack animals, right? Where our relationships with other people are incredibly important. And how much, let's call it poor training, or how much conditioning do we have in our language? We all know how much our language affects the way we think, the way we interact. So thanks for pointing that out. It really seems like a key piece, as well as don't use should. Are there any other words, Carrie, maybe that
well,
we want to get rid of, or that we may think about changing?
Anything that has words, we all know words are energy packets. Words are powerful. So as a sovereign and someone who's very, very tuned into sovereignty, once we start practicing sovereignty, we automatically start using words that support rather than direct or control. So it isn't so much the word, although should is one of those words that carries with it an energetic of criticism all the time, or judgment there. And I'm sure you can come up with others, you oughta, So for should, I substitute could. You could consider this alternative. That's neutral. And I guess the answer to your question really isn't the word itself, but the energy in which it's used. So we can feel when we're in neutral with someone else, or when we're trying to impact an outcome with another. So it's really more the energy and how we're communicating than the actual word.
Yeah.
You know, it's possible you could even use the word should in a way, although I won't, because really it's the energy. It isn't the specific word. I wouldn't say you better be careful.
Mm.
You better da, 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 da. And you can feel it right there.
Yeah, so it's the
And
feeling where it comes from more than I hear what you're saying. This is
Yeah.
great because if
Yeah.
you're already standing in a place of that, your energy is to see others in that way, I think, as
Yeah.
well. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point. It's about how we see and hold the other. So everybody that I see, I know, unless they're not human, we know there's some of those,
Mhm.
are light beings. And they have stepped down their frequency to be in these human vessels for a purpose. Whatever the purpose is, doesn't matter. They're light beings in their essence.
Yeah.
And so they all deserve my respect and my honor for them having chosen to come to schoolroom Earth to do what they came here to do. That has nothing to do with me. It's none of my business what they choose. So that's another way to hold it, is to look at everyone as a being of light, or a light being, or a divine being, have whatever words you want to use for it. And in that vision of the other that way, there's an automatic honoring and respect.
Yeah.
That
No, perfect.
that eliminates my energetic of wanting to make them do something that I want them to do, or that I think they should do for whatever reason.
Well, thank you that's perfect. Thank you so much for that. And also, you're kind of heading right where my brain was going. What I want to ask you about is the higher level look at that, or let's say just a different frequency look at that, is understanding that other people have their own soul contracts, their own soul path, and just respecting that in the same way you want to be respected, I think is huge. So there's a piece there for people to chew on, excuse me, as well as the fact that like you said before, a lot of folks don't even know what their own contracts are, or what their so like if we ourselves are in a scattered space or a victim mindset, or whatever kind of anomaly or aberration we have toward sovereignty, to think that we know better for others is pretty crazy, really. Like, I mean, sure, there's spots of responsibility where it's my job to lead this, whether it's with your kids or at work. Sure, we've all agreed on this at some point,
right,
that this is this person's duty, and we're working with that or not. But yeah, so this is, I love where you're taking it. Please do continue.
Let's see, where do we want? Well, I think the kernel of where this starts is in relationships that we have now, especially those that are the most important or most significant in our lives: parent, child, lover, best friends, boss, coworker. In those situations that we're already in, with those potentially highly emotional connections, agreeing to change the way we relate with each other. So even, I'm going to take it to parent-child to start with. I don't know who came up with this idea, but I'm sure you've all heard that the phrase 7 is the age of reason for a child, which means that at 7 years old, they're pretty mature enough to understand and be reasoned with, or to understand right and wrong, etc. 13 is the age of sovereignty, and that's from a spiritual perspective, and I can't prove that, and nobody has to believe anything I'm saying, including that. We've got the screen blipping. Jay,
it will go forever. Go ahead and continue.
Okay, all right, okay. So particularly with parents and teenagers, this would be a great place to start. If you've got teenagers that are 12, 13, 14 or older, they have an innate sense of their sovereignty. And that coupled with, I've taught a lot of teenagers, so I know the energetic, that coupled with their natural development of separation from parent, which creates all kinds of problems, is golden ground upon which to sit down and come up with a plan for how you two, you and the child, are going to navigate the next, what, it's not just to 18, because you might put them through college, it could be 21, whatever, where you're supporting them. One of the things that parents make a big mistake about is just because they're supporting a child financially, they feel like they have the right to tell the child what to do. Nothing could be further from the truth. They have the honor of being a guiding light for that child, who, again, back to, is a being of divine, being of light, who came here for their experience on this planet. So that's a place where we can start working, and literally sit down and have a conversation about sovereignty. I want to honor your sovereignty. I want you to honor mine. I want us to be connected in love, cooperating with each other as much as possible. How about we make a plan? So that would be a starting point that I would recommend with parents and kids. And you can even do it with younger kids, not quite, this is a little sticky wicket, because of course a parent does have a responsibility to keep a child safe. And that always needs to be honored. And so there might come a time when a parent says, no, you can't go hang gliding at 12. Sorry, not happening. You do it at 18, whatever. So that's where a great place to start. The next most important or equally important place to start is between a couple. Married or not, doesn't matter, because that's another type of relationship where sovereignty is often damaged over and over and over. And sometimes it's purposeful. There are situations where people are drawn together that are opposites. For instance, in terms of the communication styles, people who are very direct often run over people who are more nurturing. But a lot of them are attracted to each other because they fulfill each other's needs. The person who's nurturing often needs direction. The person who's the director often needs to be nurtured, to soften. But because they're opposites, and there are a lot of opposite styles in male-female relationships that are attracted to each other, and their styles are what cause a lot of problems, not their essences. So again, with couples, if they can sit down and say, I really want to come from my own sovereignty. I would like you to honor my choices, even if you don't agree with them. And I'd like to do the same with you. Can we practice that? That would change the planet right there. Just that. Forever.
Yeah, I know. It seems so hard for certain folks, right, to get there. It's such a long road. They're not used to it. But I think it actually makes it easier. You know what I mean? It's actually less effort in the long run if you take that effort right up front. I have to riff a story real quick off what you're saying about the teenagers. I worked a lot with hundreds of kids in there between like 16 and 22 when I was doing my coffee gig for 15 years. And I came across a lot of really wonderful, amazing, put together kids. And so I'd often ask them, I'd be like, hey, how come you came out so great? What are your parents doing right? Just hit them with it. A lot of them, were these homeschool kids, and a lot of time their parents, not always. But there was something consistent about what they would tell me. They said, well, my parents always kind of just respected my intelligence. And instead of being bossy, they just told me what they saw and they would give me options. I'm like, what do you mean?
Exactly.
Well, like, for instance, like, I remember asking this, I remember a gal told me once, she says, well, I remember asking my parents, hey, there's this party I want to go to, right? And my parents were like, hey, is there going to be drinking there and this and that and whatever? Oh, probably. And they said, and so their answer to her was, look, you can go if you want, right? But I'll tell you, when I went to parties like that, this is what would happen to me. Like the cops showed up and da. But there were some kids who would like see the struggle, and the minute like that went down, they would get out of there and just call their parents to come home. And, so, hey, it's up to you. You can go if you want. but you know, and again,
Yeah.
trying to use an extreme example, but and they're not trying to scare their kid, but just give them information. Look, you could end up in prison or pregnant if you play this wrong, or
Exactly.
you could have a great time. But they, in other words, at a certain point, they would just tell them what they knew honestly, and then respected their kid enough to make their choice. And
Yeah.
so often those kids would make the right choice. And every once in a while they'd go to the party anyway, so to speak, and then they'd see the drama their parents were talking about and then book on home. But it just really honored them as people to have the freedom and choices and respect.
Yeah. Yeah. Honor is a huge piece of this. Honor and respect is are huge pieces of it. If you honor and respect another, you naturally don't try to boss them around. It just, that's what I was saying earlier about when I got this piece, I was blown away. If I'm in my sovereignty and I'm honoring your sovereignty, there really isn't a match for conflict. It isn't that you have to push conflict away, it simply falls away. That's the beauty of honoring sovereignty. And one of my mantras in this whole thing is allow, allow, allow. Somebody's doing something and you don't like it, it's none of your business. unless it is, you know, unless it's your child and they're about to get hurt and they're young or something like that. But your friend is doing something, you know, I'll use a real life example. I watched two sisters hassling with each other because one wanted to get a nose job and the other one was incensed that her sister would want to get any kind of surgery. And instead of just, she could have, the one who was incensed could have said, you know, you're beautiful, I really don't feel like you need that, but if you're going to do it, I'll be there to take you home from the hospital. That's honoring sovereignty. Instead, these two sisters were in my kitchen and they went at each other for 20 minutes. I finally like, you know, did something to just get their attention and stop them and say, do you guys realize that you're creating war here with each other? Because that's what we do when we don't honor sovereignty. We're warring with each other. And that's, again, another rampant result going on the planet, you know, for many people in many cultures. It doesn't matter even what the culture is. Maybe not Japan. They're very, you know, they're very courteous. They might have a stronger sense of sovereignty, but I don't know actually, as I'm saying that it has to do with sovereignty. They've just been programmed into courtesy. They may not even recognize it having to do with sovereignty. So,
I absolutely love the folks in Japan. They were some of the kindest, most giving, thoughtful people I've ever met on the planet. I was uncanny. And you know what? Maybe sovereignty does play in there, but I like that you're pointing out how culturally there are different degrees of this. Yeah. Heidi, I see you having a look in your eye. Did you want to chime in there, Heidi? No? Okay. All right. She's just taking it all in. Okay. You know, this is great. I could talk to you about this for so long, and I really want to talk to you, Carrie, about so many more other things. We're at 47 minutes here. And you know how I like to do, guys, I always like to give people tools, action steps. What is it we can do? There's a lot of information, even though it can be simple and organic, right? Carrie, how would you like to maybe pare it down so people can take a piece of this and maybe act on it, or you know, you see where I'm headed. What do you think in terms of action steps?
Okay, I'm going to give you two tools. I've got a whole bag full of them, but these are two visuals that I've found are very helpful for people. So the first one is the stagecoach visual. So imagine that you're on a beautiful wooden stagecoach and you're the driver and you've got 6 horses and you're holding the reins, and a beautiful windy country road, and you just kind of get lost in your thoughts, you know, whatever, and you let go of the reins. I'm going to make this analogy. The stagecoach is your mind. You are the driver, and the horses are your thoughts. And a lot of times, a lack of honoring sovereignty with another comes from how we're thinking and runaway thoughts. back to you should, you know, the tape loop that runs. So imagine this stage, beautiful stagecoach, beautiful sunny day, and you drop the reins. Remember now, the horses are your thoughts. What do you imagine is going to happen when you drop the reins on that stagecoach on a nice country windy road? What's going to happen? Anybody got an idea? I mean, it's kind of obvious what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You let go of the reins.
Rosie or Dave to chime in.
The
I've talked
horses
too
are
much.
going this way, and the carriage is like in a tumble.
Exactly, exactly. If you let your thoughts run away with you like runaway horses on a stagecoach, as soon as they hit a curve in the road, the stagecoach is over its end in a ditch.
Tizzle
Okay.
and
Ass
up.
over tea kettle is just
That's what I was gonna
felt that
say.
coming and I liked it. But no, keep going.
So it's the same with us. We have to be the controller of those horses, of those thoughts, so that we don't run amok with others with our thoughts. So the visual is when you get into a situation where you can see your thoughts wanting to say something to somebody else. You know, Dave, you can use this with your son. When you see him let your grandson do something that you would never have let your son do, you just pull visually in your mind's eye, pull back on the reins and get control of the horses, of the thoughts. You're in control here. You're responsible for what comes out of your mouth. Us are responsible for how we allow those horses to run the country road. So it's a beautiful visual. I use it a lot. I just, you don't even have to close your eyes. You can, most people can visualize this stagecoach image in their mind's eye. And you're sitting there as the driver and you've got those reins in your hands. And all you have to do is just pull back on them and take it back to you and process it within you before you let it come out of your mouth. So that's number one tool. The second one is another visual, and I like visuals because now that you've got the stagecoach in your mind, you'll never lose it. And so I'm going to give you another similar one. And this one I call staying on your side of the net. And it's a tennis visual. Pretty much everybody's seen a tennis match at some point or another. And pretty much everybody knows that if you step over one of the lines in the anywhere on the court, it's a fault and you lose a point. And particularly if you're hitting at a ball and even if your racket goes across the net, it's a fault. So the staying on your side of the net visual is, again, whenever you feel like you just got to say something to somebody, it's like visualize that tennis net and pull yourself and the racket back, again, giving yourself time to process what you really want to do in that instance to maintain a sense of sovereignty for yourself and the other. So those are two tools that I use all the time still.
Oh, and you do great at it. I've had the wonderful, blessed opportunity to spend a good amount of time with you, in your personal field and working with you. And I will say that there's no doubt that you do carry this on the Carrie carries this on a regular basis, that it's absolutely part of your interaction, I think. And so you're definitely a living example of it, and it works really well. You're speaking, what I'm hearing too, the words I'm using for it, you're speaking about mental discipline and taking a breath, think before you speak, right? Take a moment to do this. And it also ties back to what you're saying. I love these visuals. I love the tennis visual because it goes back to having a conversation with other people so they all know where the lines are, right? Like some people they might think, oh, I'm supposed to have my racket over the net, and they're getting in everyone else's business or whatever it is. But sometimes I think, I'm certain it takes a conversation about where the lines are, right? And this is a lot about what we're talking about. about on our planet as we move forward right now. I think if we go within and we really take a look at what we're talking about here in terms of sovereignty, divine personal sovereignty, those lines start to appear as well without a ton of conversation, right? You start to, like you were saying before, there's an energy of sovereignty. So part of the discussion just has to be with ourselves, right? First, to understand where those boundaries are and are not.
Yeah.
And so it's both, I think, I guess is what I'm saying. The problem solves itself as people become more sovereign. But when we're in relationships where that hasn't always been the case and we want to move towards that, like you said, I think these conversations are super important.
Well, and you also see that as so many of the humanitarians that we are and that we deal with, understanding our personal sovereignty helps us respect, so that when we're doing service to others, we're not crossing their boundaries or deciding what they need. ZenGen is the proponent of, excuse me, tell me what you need. You tell me what you need. I will not assume that.
Exactly.
And that is respectful.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you are observing your horses, your thoughts, there's cacophony in there. So not all of them are good, necessarily brilliant in play. So we must choose the ones that come out. Justin calls it, how is what I'm going to say for ZenGen affect the other? So in that sovereignty, we make this wonderful safe bubble where we don't do that harm. We don't injure everybody by allowing the horses to run away.
Yeah, exactly. And ZenGen, you made a point. Once you start being aware of this and practicing it, it does become second nature. It becomes very natural to hold I can't remember the last time I actually did violate someone else's sovereignty. Now, I've been doing this a while, but it doesn't take that long to become aware of it, because we can feel our own energy as we're communicating with someone else. And I can tell that if I'm starting to get irritated about something, best to be quiet in that moment, pull the reins in on the horses, take a second to really consider how I want to communicate with that other person. And for me, it's for two reasons. I want to stay in connection and cooperation. Those are my two big things, because if I'm in connection, and first of all, if I'm in connection, I'm probably in love, in a love energy, and that feeds into cooperation. And then we're having a lot more fun, even even if we don't agree on everything. We aren't making that war that I mentioned that those two sisters were doing. We can disagree and stay in connection and cooperation if we're honoring the sovereignty of ourselves and the other, because in that moment we're back to allowing. It's like, pay attention to what's actually going on in the moment with the other and just let it be. Just allow them to have whatever, allow the other to be, do, have, choose, and believe.
I love
no matter
that.
what it is.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think it's so great here at the end too, that Mama brought up the idea of service, right, and light work. So many of us are service inclined. We have to be very careful that we're not tromping some of the sovereignty. I want you to have this. I think you should have whatever. No. If we're alert to what we're giving off, and it makes a huge difference, right? And I think you nailed it earlier when speaking of action steps and tools, very specifically, you said, ask more questions. Instead of trying to give direction, ask questions. Either be still and observant, be still and silent. This is what I like to do, not add energy to it, right? Just observe the energies that are there. And then ask permission to affect it, so to speak. What can I do to help? Do you even want my help? Like, how do you feel about this? Asking questions to me has been so much more effective than trying to boss anybody. And it doesn't make me happy either. And what kind of pattern does that build for someone who's always trying to boss folks around? Now, just like you said at the very beginning, there's a pressure on both people that is unfair and unsustainable, you know?
Yeah.
There's a
And-
respect in listening as well, which is the exercise that I'm trying to get down pat. As
You
you
do great.
Yeah, well, as you're thinking about, and again, observe, absorb, and reining in the horses, is that when you stop thinking, you're in the moment and you're actually listening when you ask a question, and in a non-judgmental way. So when you're silent, you don't have any of those emotions that come in to get in the way, and you're learning something about that other person and respecting their sovereignty. They're not having to explain to you why or anything. You're just asking a question. Be respectful and actually listen to the damn answer.
I love that.
And the other point that you brought out that's really important is that those of us that are in service, and I'm going to use a phrase, servant leaders, because we are going to be in a leadership position with these projects that we're going to be launching and facilitating. We're going to be interacting with people all over the spectrum. They're going to be hurt, they're going to be angry, they're going to be sad, they're going to be confused, and they may not even know what they want, what they do, be, have, believe. At that point, they may not have any awareness because they're in emotion. So for us in those situations, it's even more important that we're honoring sovereignty and paying attention, as Mama says, because there is a likelihood of us as servant leaders wanting to fix things, we want to serve. That's what we're here to do. But if we are assuming that we do know better than them what they need, and if for some of them, it may take us multiple communications with them for them to get past the intense emotion that they're going to be experiencing to even be able to express to us what they need and want. So this, when we're on our side of the net, again, especially in these situations, we will give them the grace of being wherever they are, allow them to be where they are, not try to fix it, not try to change it for them, support them wherever they are, and then slowly draw out of them their needs and wants. And while we're doing that, they're watching us. They're watching us in our sovereignty, modeling that for them. That's probably the greatest gift we can give them.
Huzzah, right? Setting that
Very
example.
nice.
Thank you so much, Carrie. You're just full of gems, right? Like it's fantastic. You got a basket full of them. This is fantastic. We should probably, did I just say should? Learn your lessons, boy. No, this is great. Normally, here we go. I got to do a little thing here and just kind of like suss out and butter the energies here and bring it back. I might have to, it might take a little longer than normal here because I got a lot of chi coming out. But there we go. Do my little sprinkle sauce, fix that all up. And in about an hour, we like to kind of close it down. And I think you really gave us a great place to stop. We don't want to necessarily, we want to give folks a drink of water, not necessarily throw the whole bucket at them. And they have some action steps here. I would like to, however, not just thank you so much, Carrie, for your experience and time and the way you deliver everything and the way you do set an example for people to observe exactly what you're speaking of. But I definitely want to give a chance to Heidi and David to maybe chime in before we run off here. I don't want to exclude anybody's contribution here at the end. So Heidi, Dave, Mom, if you have anything else, or someone unmuting down there.
Sure.
Oh wait, yeah, Dave, there we go.
Well, the only thing I would have to add or to say to this, as you were speaking, Carrie, the only thing I could think of was my daughter's going through the educational system. So I think that would be another topic, obviously,
Yes.
another
Right.
thing, because there's nothing worse. Well, there's probably worse things as a parent, but to have a child and then see their light just dim through the educational system and how they're routed through this should, right? And So I would really be interested in to see if there's what solutions we could bring to that.
Okay, yeah,
Those
that'd be a great conversation another time.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Actually, you know, I
And
thank you
thank
so much
you.
for that,
Thank
Heidi,
you
in
for
the
it.
prompt, because that's what I
Beautiful.
wanted to, that was the other thing I really wanted to
Yes,
pick
thank you,
Carrie's
Carrie.
soul and brain on is, you know, how we do that as leaders and teachers and our children and all of that. So I'm super excited to have a second conversation on that specifically. Thanks, Heidi. I love that. Dave, how about you, my man?
Yeah, I really got a lot out of the stagecoach. That really helps me a lot. I love visual things that I could visually put in my hands and grabbing those reins and grabbing a hold of those thoughts. And maybe, you know, like I say, putting in a good intention. Like I say, let's assume, my son wants to do something crazy with my grandson, or like you were saying. So, what do I do? Well, I think it's, I remain quiet and observe, and I come up with the types of solutions that you mentioned, where I talk to him in advance as to how I will be approaching the situation, and explain a lot about sovereignty, and probably even share this video with my children. Both of them, I think, could really get a lot from it, and I think the rest of our viewers as well. Because what I'm really seeing in the way you're describing all this is really removing a lot of the separation that exists on the planet. The divide and conquer is so strong in these days, and utilizing what you laid out here in this video is very, very helpful for people to basically stop fighting and looking in the wrong direction. So for that, I really thank you, and we really look forward to having you back on again. And we really thank you here at the ZenGen Collective. Really wonderful information and needed at this time. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Dave. And on that note, Dave, you want to just take us on out then and sign off for the ZenGen Collective here?
Yes. So thank everyone for tuning into the ZenGen Collective video YouTube channel. And we thank you, and we will be bringing more interviews, and we'll be bringing a lot of good information for you, like this video. So please stay tuned, and like and subscribe and share with your friends. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for tuning in.
Let's stay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.